Let's be real for a second. What if some of the biggest things that determine a student's future aren't actually in the curriculum? What if they're in the invisible social currents flowing through every classroom? Today, we're diving deep into this hidden world of in-school factors, the things that can shape a student's life long after they've left the school gates.
I want you to think back to your own school days for a minute. You knew who the smart kids were, right? Who the troublemakers were. But here's the question. Were those labels actually earned, or were they given? Way back in 1997, research by Padfield showed how these informal reputations can become official pretty fast, changing how everyone, from teachers to other students, sees a person.
So, here's our game plan. We're going to deconstruct the social architecture of the classroom. We'll start with how these invisible labels get slapped on in the first place. Then we'll see how they can actually become real. We'll look at how the whole school system can reinforce them, see how students react, and finally ask that big question: is a student's fate sealed from day one?
Okay, first up, let's zoom right in on the most fundamental, most powerful interaction in the entire school, the dynamic between one teacher and one student.
This all starts with something called labeling. At its core, it's the process where teachers, often subconsciously, classify their students. But it's not always about grades. A lot of the time, it's based on stereotypes or those informal reputations we just talked about. And the scary part? Once a label sticks, it can be almost impossible to peel off.
So what's fueling this whole process? Well, a really key idea here is something called cultural capital. The easiest way to think about it is like a type of social currency. Breeny's research in 2005 pointed out that a student's family background gives them a certain amount of this capital, and it has a massive impact on their school experience.
And you can really see how this plays out in the classroom. A student with high cultural capital, they often just fit a teacher's ideal of a good pupil. As a researcher named Nash pointed out in '72, they know the unspoken rules, how to talk to adults, how to manage impressions. This can even help them overcome other disadvantages. But on the flip side, a student with low cultural capital might not fit that mold. They can get stereotyped as a low achiever, basically being seen as a failure before they've even had a real shot. Okay, so we've got the label, but what makes it so dang powerful? Well, that's where things get even more intense, and the label morphs into something much bigger: the self-fulfilling prophecy. The idea is actually pretty simple, but it's also kind of devastating. It's when a prediction, say a teacher's belief about a student's ability, ends up making itself come true just because the prediction was made in the first place. It's the engine that turns a simple, invisible label into a student's actual reality. And it tends to happen in 4 steps. Step 1, the teacher forms the label, maybe thinking a student from a certain background isn't that bright. Step 2, the teacher acts on it. Maybe they give that student less attention or easier work. Step 3, this is the heartbreaking part. The student starts to believe it themselves. They internalize the label. And boom, step 4, their performance drops to match the original prediction. The prophecy is fulfilled.
And here's the kicker. These labels are sticky. This quote from Ketty's 1971 study is just so powerful because it shows these labels don't just disappear at the end of the year. No, they follow a student from class to class, influencing how every new teacher sees them before they've even had a chance.
All right, let's zoom out now, because this isn't just about what happens in the heads of individual teachers. The schools themselves have systems that bake these labels into the very structure of the institution, on a massive scale.
A lot of schools group students by perceived ability. There are 3 main ways they do this. You've got streaming, where kids are put in the same ability group for all subjects. There's banding, which is often based on reports from their primary school. And then there's setting, which is a bit more flexible and groups students by ability for each individual subject. So here's the crucial question. Who actually ends up in which group? A classic study by Hargreaves in 1967 found a really stark pattern. Overwhelmingly, middle-class students were placed in the top streams, while working-class students were concentrated in the bottom ones. This kind of suggests that streaming often ends up reinforcing social class divides, not just sorting kids by raw talent. And being put in a lower stream can have some really serious knock-on effects. These students can be stigmatized as failures, get given boring, repetitive work, and find it's nearly impossible to ever move up. You can see how that would breed resentment, right? It can even lead to anti-school attitudes, which just creates this vicious cycle of low achievement. So imagine you're a student facing all of this, the labels, the streams, the low expectations. What do? Well, you don't just sit there and take it.
You find your people. You form your own tribe. And these student subcultures are a direct reaction to the official school culture. It's how students navigate this complex social world. It's their way of carving out an identity, whether that means conforming to the rules or pushing back against them hard. A researcher named Woods laid it out as a spectrum. On one end, you've got the ingratiators, the ones who are totally pro-school and try to get in the teacher's good books. And on the complete other end, you have the rebels, the kids who reject everything the school stands for and create their own counterculture. But, real life is rarely that black and white. Later research from Mack and Guile found much more subtle groups. You had your academic achievers who were using school to climb the social ladder. You had the new enterprisers who cared more about practical skills like IT than traditional subjects. And my favorite, the real Englishmen, middle-class boys who would make fun of tryhards in public but secretly work their tails off to get into a good university.
Okay, so this brings all the pieces of the puzzle together and leads us to the biggest, most important question of all. With all these powerful forces at play, is a student's future basically written for them before they even leave school?
And it's a totally fair question. You have to wonder, do these theories make it sound a bit too determined? Does a student have any real say in their own story, or are they just playing a part in a script that was written by the school, by their teachers, by society? Well, here's the pushback, and it's a big one. Students have agency. They can and absolutely do refuse to accept a negative label. And sometimes being told you're going to fail is the exact motivation someone needs. It can spark what's called a self-negating prophecy, where a student works twice as hard just to prove everyone wrong. But we can't ignore the harsh reality. For so many students, the system does fail them. This number right here is a sobering reminder of the real-world stakes. According to Hughes and Church, about 8,000 students are permanently excluded from UK schools every single year. And the vast majority of them? They come from working-class backgrounds. Now, governments have recognized these deep-seated problems and have tried to intervene. The general approach is called compensatory education. The idea is to run programs that give extra support to disadvantaged students to try and make up for inequalities they face outside of school. Things like Sure Start and extended schools are all about trying to level that playing field to give everyone a fair shot. So, we've pulled back the curtain on the hidden rules of the classroom. We've seen the invisible labels, the self-fulfilling prophecies, the systematic divisions. Knowing all this, the final question really is for you. How does it change the way you think about what it really means to succeed or to fail at school?